The Smurg by Jessiy. Read by Adam X. Mabella. Chapter 6. Grindelwald finally captured. Mercusa's miracle catch. Grindelwald incarcerated. Hermione threw another copy of the Daily Prophet onto the table and sighed. She knew that this wasn't over. It was still early in the game, in fact. She knew they were over 20 years away from the end of this war. If they stuck to the original timeline, that was. She rolled her shoulders and considered her next step. Merope was set on marrying Albus Dumbledore and had been badgering Hermione to liaison with him for over a week now. She used her many and varied skills, tried her hand at persuasion and manipulation, hoping that one of the other available men would do. The problem turned out to be that Merope happened to like Albus. She felt as if they were Hermione's first line of defense, that they were her only allies in the time she found herself in. If Tom the Slag was out of the picture, and it seemed he was, then only Albus would do. It frustrated Hermione to no end. She took a sip of her coffee and closed her eyes.
"You don't have to look so constipated,"
Merope said as she sat across the table and smiled at Jasper, who placed her breakfast in front of her.
"Isn't it a good thing that Grindelwald has been captured?"
"They can't hold him. He will be out soon," Hermione murmured into her coffee.
"Oh,"
Merope said, spearing a grape from her fruit bowl. "Why does it have to be Albus? There are so many available wizards who would be very happy to have your pedigree, and I would be very willing to provide the dowry we were talking about."
"Do you know why I'm so stuck on Albus Dumbledore?"
"If I knew, I wouldn't ask," Hermione grumbled.
"He doesn't want me for my money or my family. What he wants,
why should he have to be the one to go against Grindelwald? If not him, then me. Why should I have to do it?"
"You are the most equipped person to do it."
"Maybe I just want a quiet life in the countryside, breeding Kneazles and spending my time with my nephew." Merope lifted a single sardonic brow.
"And I'm Merlin himself,"
she deadpanned. Hermione sighed again.
"Think about this, Hermione. Hypothetical situation. You, me, and the baby are living quietly here as we raise him. We keep to ourselves and you breed your damn Kneazles. Then my son is old enough to go to Hogwarts, and let's say he gets sorted into Slytherin or Gryffindor. He hears about the war going on, about the wizards trying to kill muggles. We both know he's going to be smart and powerful. Let's imagine he gets recruited and he joins Grindelwald. How does this accomplish what he came back for? Maybe he won't become a Dark Lord in his own right. Maybe he joins up with the revolutionaries instead. Now, what better ally could you and I have if not Albus Dumbledore? While you are off doing your thing protecting my son, we will have a family. A strong and powerful one. Is there anyone who would dare come against my son with Albus Dumbledore on his side? Will Albus ever let my son be swayed to the dark?" I hate that you make sense." Hermione scowled bitterly into her cup, wishing the answer really did sit at the bottom with the dregs, even if the practice was typically for tea leaves. Maybe she really should have paid more attention to divination. "I'll send him a message today." "Thank you."
Yeah. Merope smiled and spat another grape, leaving all the strawberry chunks behind.
"Jasper."
"Yes, mistress."
"Bring me parchment, ink, and quill."
"Right away, mistress."
Within moments he was back, laying the asked-for things next to Hermione's empty plate. "Albus, I wish to discuss something with you. Hogshead, Saturday next, 10 p.m. Discretion is of utmost importance. H.S." Hermione sat at the table in the Hogshead across from Dumbledore, a joyful twinkle in his eye. "It would be my honor to marry your sister, Merope," he said, leaning forward eagerly, barely suppressing his delight in the way things have turned out. "Her child shall be my own, and I will hold her in the highest esteem, I promise. The only dowry I require, of course, is the one matter we have previously discussed. I have no need of your wealth, as I will be able to care for her and our children quite adequately. And I will begin the hunt as soon as you're married." Hermione stifled her grimace, the only indication that she would rather be anywhere else than sitting in the pub with Dumbledore. Hermione tried not to grind her teeth as she reflected on Merope's choice. She had spent several days trying to convince the pregnant woman that the two of them would give Tom all the love and care he could possibly need, but Merope held firm. Hermione apparently just didn't understand the stigma against children born out of wedlock. It rankled her that the 1920s were still so harsh against single women and their children. She could not wait until the Wizarding World reached equality for women's suffrage. She chose to ignore completely the other reasons Merope had for choosing this match. Dumbledore held out his wand, waving over Aberforth with his other, bringing Hermione back to the distasteful topic at hand. Merope marrying Dumbledore on the condition that Hermione finds and takes down Grindelwald. Privately, she thought it might not be too hard. He had a tendency to show up where she was anyway, and at most random times too. "Will you be our binder?" Albus asked his brother. Aberforth nodded and held his wand aloft, waiting for them to begin. "I, Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore, vow to marry Merope Gaunt, if she so chooses, providing for her and any children she will bear for the entirety of my life. I, Hermione Jean Granger Slytherin, vow to stop Gellert Grindelwald in his plan of wizard domination and any other nefarious plans he has concocted to the best of my abilities, as long as the first vow has been met." 2 golden ribbons curled around their clasped hands and flashed white before going invisible. Dumbledore smiled and pulled out the chair next to him, bidding his brother sit. "Since we are all to be family, let's have a drink together." "If there is any justice in the world, she will back out," Hermione grumbled, causing Aberforth to laugh loudly at his brother's expense. Even Dumbledore's good mood couldn't be dampened. He had been dreading the confrontation with Grindelwald for years, Hermione knew, and now that this burden was lifted from his shoulders, he was a new man. Aberforth had poured 2 fingers of his finest whiskey in each of their glasses, and the trio toasted Albus' fortunes. Hermione just pounded her back and wondered what she had done to earn a life saturated with never-ending battles. She only switched out one Dark Lord for another. And this time it was worse because this Dark Lord wanted to get in her knickers. After Hermione emptied her drink, she left the brothers behind to celebrate on their own. She needed to get out of there, to think, to come to terms with what she just agreed to. Deciding to do something was one thing. To vow magically to do it was quite another. The moment she cleared the entryway, Hermione twisted on the balls of her feet and apparated away. Seconds later, she reappeared on the banks of a beautiful lake that was more marsh than an actual lake in the Forest of Dean. Tears welled in her eyes as the nostalgia hit her with force of an oncoming strain. This was where Ron came back to them, where they destroyed the locket, where they fixed the ravages of their friendship. Doubling over, Hermione cradled her stomach as the first wave of gut-wrenching grief hit her. It had been so long since she let herself mourn. Or if she was intending on being honest with herself, it was the first and only time she allowed herself to grieve. She missed them with an awe-consuming grief. For years they were her life, her only family, and then one day they were gone. Dead. Destroyed. Years passed by in her memories of the bickering, the kindness nagging the boys to study harder. Harry's smile, Ron's arm flung across her shoulders. The 3 of them in and out of dangerous situations since their first year. Together. Always together. Desperately, she gulped the air into her lungs. She couldn't breathe. Closing her eyes tight against the pain, she felt tears run over her cheeks and drip onto the ground at her feet. They would live, she told herself over and over. Their futures would not include any of the misfortune that they had experienced. There would be no war. Harry would have his parents. Ron would never be forced into camping in the wild, eating only mushrooms and berries. And she would be able to concentrate on her schoolwork. Perhaps she would still be their friend. Perhaps not. They might not even be in the same house. But they would live. And that was the whole entire reason she was in 1926. Hermione wiped the wetness from her face and took several more lungs full of air to steady herself. Her future may not include Harry and Ron, but theirs may include her, and that thought was enough of encouragement to stop her tears and get back to the task at hand. Operation Happy Childhood. It was the most and least she could do. Once steady, She disapparated again, this time to a place she had only ever seen in pictures. She landed on a small rise that overlooked a beautiful valley. The future site of the most secure prison in the world, Normangard. A tent city set off to the left, just outside the budding trees. They were grey and average, and Hermione wondered which tent was likely to house the blueprints. "I knew you couldn't stay away." His husky voice murmured against her hair. "I knew they couldn't hold you." "You've come to join me." "In your dreams?" True." He wrapped his arms around her waist and held her. He could hear his breathing, feel the rise and fall of his chest. "If you aren't here to join my noble cause, why are you here?" "Could I convince you that this is madness? Could I convince you to stop this war?" "Why ever would I stop?" he asked, amusement heavily laced in his voice. "Because there will be many casualties. Because I'm asking you to. Take your pick." Hermione shivered as cool wind swept around them. Grindelwald pulled her body back into his, bringing her closer and giving her his warmth. "It's not right that we have to live in secrecy and that muggles get to live freely and ignorantly. So many things could be better if only we were the ones in charge. One thing I have learned is that magic just makes things worse sometimes. We govern our own and they govern themselves. It works." "Not always," he mumbled in her hair as he buried his face in her wild curls. "This is the last chance, Grindelwald, please." Hermione took a shuddering breath. "Please stop." "The last chance for what?" he asked in a harsh voice while pulling away from her warm body. "I made a vow today, a magical vow." "Oh?" "I vowed that I would hunt you down and stop you." "Why?" he whispered sadly. "Because what I got in return was too much for me to give up." "So we are enemies?" "It doesn't have to be that way." "Oh, sweetheart, it does. It does." He stepped away from her, putting several feet between them. Hermione shook from the renewed cold of the spring wind. She brought her arms up and tried to keep her teeth from chattering. Behind her she heard a rustling, and she knew that this little safe interlude was about to end. "We could have been amazing, you and me," he said, as he settled his warm cloak around her shoulders, enveloping her in his scent. "Stop this, and maybe we could see where we go." "No, my darling, it's too late for both of us to stop our courses now. You should go." "Next time I see you?" "I know." Hermione turned around and looked up into his sweet face, too boyish and charming to be a Dark Lord. "One kiss?" he asked, raising his hand to cup her cheek. Adrenaline raged through her veins and her lips tingled. She wanted to know what it would be like with him, but why? Why would she do it? If she hated it, it was a wasted kiss. If she loved it, she would have to deny herself. Either way, it was better not to know. That is what her head tried to tell her treacherous heart. I can't," she said, and she watched him nod and drop his hand from her face. "As you wish." Taking a step back, she looked at his regretful face, turned on the balls of her feet, and disapparated. Emotionally wrung out, Hermione walked into the house that she shared with Merope and was bombarded as soon as she crossed the threshold. Her talk with Dumbledore had felt like a lifetime ago.
"What did Albus say?"
Merope breathed, her whole demeanor strung tightly with stress and nerve, despite being told by Hermione earlier that she had already been approached by Dumbledore for this exact thing. No reassurances were acceptable without an ironclad deal. Was Dumbledore serious in his offer? She couldn't be sure until the ring was on her finger, and this was the first obstacle. "What do you think he said?" Hermione rolled her eyes and pushed past Merope to go to a room to change out of her robes. Carefully she hung the dark grey wool of Grindelwald's cloak inside her armor, lightly brushing the soft material before shutting them away. She wanted a glass of wine and sweatpants, that was all. No such luck, though, as Merope followed her into her room, wringing her hands. Hermione ignored her for a few minutes while she changed, ignoring the fact that Merope was watching her. She had an unusual concept of privacy, Merope. "Albus laughed at you, didn't he? He wasn't actually serious." She worried her once hopeful gaze was now crestfallen and dejected. "Tom won't even speak to me now. Your life would be so much the worse for having him in it. Merope, you are so much better than he is. I have no idea what you actually like about him, but... Hermione trailed off mid-rant, feeling bad at the look of disgruntled pain on Merope's face. This was an argument that they had several times. Each time Merope had defended her sleazy lover, claiming he was just a misunderstood man in a sea of cookie-cutter clones. It was a point of contention in which they could and would never agree. Dumbledore, of course, said yes. It was something he had been begging me for a month, Merope. I wish you would reconsider. He doesn't love you. He doesn't even know you. The only reason he wants to marry you at all is that he wants something from me. For you, I would do this, but we can raise your baby together. You don't need to be married.
Hermione, I love you like a sister. You are the bravest, most kind, brilliant, powerful witch anyone could ask for. But you are from the future, and I suspect things for women are much different in that time. I probably could weather whatever horrible things and situations that society could throw at me, but I'm not worried about what would happen to me. Can you just imagine what it would be like for my baby? When he goes to Hogwarts, he will be treated as something less, not only because he's a half-blood, but also because he was born to an unmarried woman. That is 2 strikes against him before he even steps foot in his school. If I can make his life better by getting married, I will do so. You said you were here to make sure my son had a good and meaningful life. This is how I need to do it. Hermione blew out a heavy breath and nodded. That is why I entered into an agreement. Everything I do for Tom. The reason I am here, the reason you are with me, the reason I agree to Dumbledore's crazy schemes is all for Tom. He's too important to me to let anything happen to him. I have come to care very much for you, Merope. You are like family to me, and I am glad that in all this craziness I've been able to spend time with you. Tom truly missed out when you died in my past. Merope nodded. What did you have to agree to for Dumbledore to consent to marriage with me and accept my child as his own? I have to hunt down Grindelwald in Dumbledore's place. I don't think it will be too hard after all. He keeps stalking me. Hermione averted her gaze. She didn't want to talk about their latest meeting. Who do you think that man really was that went house hunting when we did? That was a charming, handsome man. He was interested in you. Is that the only basis you have in determining who's an evil dictator or not?
Merope snorted, rolling her hips into the door jammed and putting her hand on the opposite. She was clearly amused. You don't believe that Mr. Peveril was actually Gellert Grindelwald?
No way. Grindelwald is scary and hulking. Mr. Peveril was wonderful.
Hermione was looking at her as if she had lost her damn mind. I am afraid for Tom. Both you and Dumbledore want to bury your head in the sand. Good thing he has me as an auntie. At least he will have one sane ally. Merope shook her head with a bemused smile.
Go ahead and be paranoid. I have a wedding to plan.
Don't remind me, Hermione grumbled. The next few months flew by as Merope planned for the wedding of the year, and Hermione was stuck in a hell of ivory silk and lace. Merope was inside the house, with the woman commissioned to make the dresses, hers and Hermione's, while Hermione took the rare opportunity to take a break from all and hid outside. Dumbledore flew up the path, a huge frown on his face, a frown that grew even unhappier as he saw her. Out of an inner pocket of his lurid venom-green robe he pulled a newspaper. A foreign one from New York City. The caption read, Grindelwald's reign of terror continues. What do you want me to do with this? She asked. She never did tell anyone about her last visit with Grindelwald. I have an inside source that believes Grindelwald will be captured soon. We are both off the hook, Dumbledore said. Hermione grabbed him by the lapels of his terrible fleshy robe and pulled him close until he was mere 3 inches from her face. If you think you can back out from marrying Merope now, just because of this, think again, she growled, her voice barely above a whisper. Whatever you and your source have planned will not be enough, and if you jump ship now, I swear to you, I will make your life a living hell. I will not hunt for Grindelwald. I will not do anything at all that may or may not help you with his capture or defeat. If you hurt my sister by backing out now, I will ruin you. Dumbledore raised his hand and placed them lightly on her shoulders. I am not backing out of this wedding. I already promised I would marry Merope, and I'm not a cruel man that would commit to something only to dash the girl's hopes. Over this past months I have grown very fond of her. I only meant that if Grindelwald will be caught soon, then neither one of us needs to worry about him, that is all. Oh, she murmured, highly embarrassed, smoothing the now wrinkled robes absently where she had grabbed on and hauled him close. Right. Dumbledore snorted, his bright blue eyes twinkling away. Just because you are the one trying to catch him now doesn't mean I don't intend on helping you. With that in mind, why don't you go after the wedding tomorrow and take a trip down to that site in Germany that Grindelwald's followers are amassing at? Find out what is going on. I already know what is going on. They are building a magical prison to house anyone who goes against their regime. Then you know exactly what to look for. Blueprints? But it's not going to be that easy. Why not? I won't be able to walk into their camp and stop the nearest person and ask for directions to the tent where they're keeping the plans. To be honest, Grindelwald is there, and I bet with every fibre of my being that everyone is on the lookout for people trying to infiltrate the camp. I wouldn't recommend just walking in without a plan. There are ways to go in unseen. Hermione sighed. He was right, but damn if she didn't hate him for it. It's not like there will be anyone here for you anyway, with Merope and I going to France for the next month, unless you have taken up with Magnus Prince. What would make you think that? Hermione asked, thrown completely off from their prior subject to stare stupidly at the men. Well, the way he is telling it, you and he are nearly at the altar yourselves. Merlin, Hermione winced. Why are they so bloody persistent? You are rich and pretty and powerful and a Slytherin. If you didn't want to be chased, you shouldn't have come back as such a tempting target. Those things were to help me change Tom's life. I didn't mean it to be tempting. Her lips twisted derisively. Alas, and yet, I suppose it is just another cross for you to bear. Hermione grit her teeth, grinding them, bearing down on them hard. Why can't I just take the fucking hint that I'm not interested and would never, ever be? Because men like that don't take no for an answer. Hermione groaned and followed Dumbledore into the house and winced as Merope screeched about superstitions and dresses. Albus raised his brows at Hermione, turned back the way he had come, and shouted over his shoulder, Until tomorrow, dearest, before fleeing the house, leaving Hermione to deal with an overwrought Merope on the eve of her wedding. It did not help matters that Merope's pregnancy hormones were making life rather interesting. The next day dawned brightly. The birds were chirping loudly, and an expectant silence settled over their home. In the recesses of the kitchen, Hermione could barely make out the noise of the house elves as they went about their work, busier than usual. Today was the day that Albus Dumbledore and Merope Gaunt were to be married. Hermione sat up and rubbed her face. A few days prior, Merope told her that she had sent an invitation to Marvola and Morphin, hoping that for once in their lives they could support her. Albus Dumbledore was a good match that all but the staunchest of blood purists would be happy with. They hadn't heard anything from either of them, and Hermione didn't really expect to. If it were up to her, she would have cut them out and never looked back. She hoped for everyone's sake that the Gaunts stayed home and stayed out of Merope's and Tom's life. She would have to have a chat with Albus. Tom was his responsibility now, but much like the fight with Grindelwald, she planned on helping him. She knew the pitfalls, and by Merlin he would be prepared. All of a sudden, Merope barged in, crying, holding the strings of her corset, kinda trailing behind. What's wrong? Hermione asked, trying to smooth down her wild hair. My dress doesn't fit, she wailed. Hermione's brows drew together. How's that possible? It was fine yesterday. I'm severely bloated, came the answering wail. Kinda.
Mistress?
Can you help her?
Not without hurting the baby, mistress. Don't wants to squeeze her.
Can you resize the dress?
I can try.
No! Merope yelled. It will undo all the spells the seamstress put into it. Okay, don't panic. We will figure this out, Hermione said. She pulled her hair up and hid the whole thing with a sticking charm, set aside when the mass stayed in place on top of her head. Hermione left her bedroom and entered the extra room that they had dedicated to making of the trousseau that had been made for Merope. The wedding dress was on the mannequin in the center of the room, a swirl of beautiful ivory silk, pearls, and delicate Irish lace. Hold still, Hermione murmured, taking the strings of the corset in hand. She pulled the laces as tight as she dared, leaving Merope plenty of room to breathe, wrapping the long laces once, then twice around Merope's thickening waist. With a flick of Hermione's wand, the dress rose in the air and settled over Merope's body. With several tiny alterations that Hermione wove around the seamstress' spells, the dress finally sat perfectly on Merope's body. It had only taken an hour, which in Hermione's mind wasn't bad at all. "How much time do we have left?" Hermione muttered quietly to Kinder.
"An hour, mistress. I will have your dress."
"Thank you," Hermione said before turning back to Merope, who stood standing where she was left, wringing her hands, a faraway look in her eyes. "Merope, have you eaten yet?" "What?" Merope asked, white as a sheet. "I asked if you have eaten anything."
"I was going to, but I wanted to try the dress on first. I forgot after that."
"Ellie!" Hermione called.
"Yes, mistress,"
Ellie said as she popped in, bowing slightly at the waist. "Take Miss Merope to the kitchen and feed her something. Make it easy on the stomach. We don't need anything else to go wrong this morning."
"Yes, mistress."
Ellie slid her hand into Merope's, and within the space of a breath they were gone. "Well, Kinder, let's see what we can do with this." She gestured to her hair with a deeply amused chuckle. To be continued. Thank you for listening to this chapter of The Smurg by Jessiy Y. Read by Ella Max Mabella. If you would like to stay up to date on upcoming chapters and stories, you can follow me on YouTube, Spotify, AO3, Instagram, or Tumblr.